Good afternoon, preppers. Welcome to Goshen Prepping. Did you hear? This is huge. There's been a signed Declaration of North America signed by the President of Mexico, Obrador, the Prime Minister of Canada, Trudeau, and of course, Biden. And there are tons and tons of conspiracy theories about this declaration, and many of them are unfounded rhetoric, which is typical of what we find, isn't it? But I want to show you the facts, and I want to show you connections and what the true purpose of this declaration is. Because stay to the end, you will see their ultimate goal. And I want you to please understand that this declaration coincides perfectly with the World Economic Forum goals. And there's no coincidence that this declaration just came out just a few days before Davos's meeting, and that's, of course, what's happening right now. But anyways, it's less than a declaration in North America and more about a pledge of allegiance to the World Economic Forum, again, as I'll show you. And I want to make myself very, very clear. U.S., Mexico, and Canada are pledging their allegiance. Remember, Klaus Schwab and Henry Kissinger are tied at the hip. They are one concerted mind for the WEF. And this Declaration of North America is all about that. Let me show you. Okay, here it is, January 10th, 2023, Declaration of North America. And I'm going to try to skim through it as fast as possible. It talks about the three leaders doing this, and it's actually going to have 6 pillars, which we're going to quickly look at each one and show you the true purpose. And it says, North America shares a unique history and culture that emphasizes innovation, development, beneficial trade, etc. Okay, the first 2 paragraphs are lots of fluff. It's a crap sandwich. Have you ever heard that before, a crap sandwich? If you want to deliver crap to someone and shove it down their throat and make him eat it, you put it into a sandwich. Put a nice piece of white fluffy bread on top, a nice piece of white fluffy bread on the bottom, and then feed it to them. And they think they're getting something palatable, but it's a crap sandwich. There's the first slice of your fluffy bread. Now we started getting into the meat of it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. It goes through, talks about inclusion for everybody, including LGBTQI+, racial justice, civil rights, etc. It also goes into partnership with indigenous people, as well as women and children. I guess men are not part of this. Not really a whole lot to say here either. It's pushing for the same agenda. They've been talking about that anyway. As far as indigenous people, that's good. But also the typical things we're looking at as far as like the gay community as well. Okay, now we get to the good stuff. Climate change and environment. They recognize the critical nature of rapid and coordinated measures to tackle the climate crisis. This includes achieving our respective 2030 nationally determined contributions of the Paris Agreement. There we go. There's our first connection to the World Economic Forum, because Agenda 2030 is all about changing things for that purpose. There's our first evidence. They will work together with other countries to keep a 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit within reach. And there you go. There's your first big piece of crap that you just bit. Like you can control that anyway. Even if there is global warming or if there is climate change, which is, debatable, why in the world do you think it's something you can control? We need to be clear. The climate change nonsense is nothing less than a smokescreen to change our laws so they can actually have more control through socialism. Then we get down to competitiveness. And it's interesting in this paragraph, it talks about high quality investment, spur innovation, etc., which of course what every country wants. But it says in key industries of the future, such as semiconductors and electric vehicle batteries, which are critical for advance in electric vehicle deployment and infrastructure. Okay, I want to stress this. Because of climate change, they want to make sure there's no greenhouse emissions. That means no more gas engines. Everything's turning to electric. And to make that happen, you have to have semiconductors and batteries. Well, where do all the batteries come from to make this happen? Let's continue. Critical minerals are an essential component to accelerating North America's clean energy transition. Each country will review and map out existing potential reserves of critical mineral resources in the region. Okay, there we go. Minerals. We've seen this before. There's a Henry Kissinger quote that describes this perfectly. Depopulation should be the highest priority of foreign policy toward the third world because the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad, especially from less developed countries. There we go. There's a big chunk of it right there. This quote actually came from the National Security Study Memorandum 200. They also called the Kissinger Report, written in 74 and adopted in 75. And of course, it was classified. It was finally seen by the public in the 90s. If you notice, it says the memorandum and policies developed from the report were observed as a way the United States could use human population control to limit political power of undeveloped nations, ensure the easy extraction of foreign natural resources, and prevent young anti-establishment individuals from being born, and to protect American businesses abroad. Under contents, here's where it really comes in. The basic thesis of the memorandum was that population growth in least developed countries is a concern to U.S. national security because of civil unrest and political instability in countries that have a high potential for economic development. It's the national interest of the United States, since the U.S. economy will require large and increasing amounts of minerals from abroad. You have to understand, it's all about population control of these countries to further the interest of the United States. Well, today, the U.S. is the top of the economic ladder, but you have to understand that Kissinger, who's a political leader in the United States, is also a political leader for the World Economic Forum, and things are shifting from the U.S. to the WEF as taking that top position. That's what Kissinger and Schwab from the WEF wants. They want a new world order with global control. And think about this. Kissinger is still a major political player in the U.S. He's an inside man, if you will, kind of like almost like a spy who wants America to fall and WEF to take the lead. Does it make sense? Because Biden is pushing this WEF agenda through the Declaration of North America because, here it is, Kissinger is one of his puppeteers. Remember, the center of this crap sandwich is all about minerals for this new green energy push. Do you understand? From Kissinger's mouth, who controls the energy can control whole continents. It's no coincidence. All right, let's continue. Next is migration and development. Since June, Mexico, obviously mostly the U.S., and Canada have collectively welcomed record numbers of migrants and refugees from the Western Hemisphere under the new and expanded labor and humanitarian programs. This includes assisting host communities, promoting migrant and refugee integration, protection for refugees, asylum seekers, vulnerable migrants, strengthening asylum capacity, and establishing and promoting regular pathways for migration and protection. It's funny how people are saying, look, Biden's doing nothing about the southern border. He doesn't want to do anything about the southern border. This is very clear. Not only does he not want to stop the immigrants from coming, but he wants to establish regular pathways, literally, for them to flood into the United States. But this is more disturbing. Also addressing the root causes and impacts of irregular migration and forced displacement, and collaborating to counter xenophobia and discrimination against migrants and refugees. Xenophobia. Biden is claiming that all of this is simply against the migrants coming in. Give me a break. The United States is founded on immigration, but immigration done the right way, not simply just being unchecked, letting everybody come across. Because understand that a country without borders isn't a country specifically. And the WEF literally says it's fine with borders, but as long as there's no walls per se, it wants to make sure people can travel in and out as they see fit. It wants a 100% equal playing field for all countries with itself as a socialistic head. Then we get down to health. It goes through and talks about things like animal and pandemic influenza to prove prevention, preparedness, agility, etc., a strong health workforce, foundations with effective pandemic preparedness, etc. Simply put, it's the same agenda that our government continues to push about contagious disease prevention, contagious disease, and nothing about non-contagious disease prevention. In other words, it's nothing about true health. It wants to talk about the spread of viruses and what the country is doing to stop the spread of viruses, if you know what I mean, but it has nothing to do about like some of the true killers like heart disease, obesity, crappy nutrition and diet. It ignores that, but simply just talks about contagious diseases instead. And finally, regional security. It goes through talking about security of the nations, things like, look at this, money laundering, child sexual exploitation, firearms, and human trafficking. And the second paragraph talks about the North American drug dialogue and talking about synthetic opioids and drugs that are coming across the border. So at least it does address a few things like fentanyl. I mean, it doesn't say that specifically, but that is a synthetic opioid, which is, of course, incredibly powerful. But you know what it doesn't talk about? It doesn't talk about, well, just the immigrants themselves coming across, which again, in the United States, we actually have policies, or it's supposed to be anyway, as far as what immigrants can come and stay in the United States and which ones have to leave. And it doesn't talk about at all the influx of nefarious agents into the country. And I know that sounds cliche, but you have to understand espionage in the United States is increasing drastically, especially from like China. Chinese spies have actually been caught numerous times coming across the border in the United States, and there's nothing in this agenda that talks about that at all. And lastly, it looks forward to, well, establishing all this stuff. So nothing to see here. It's all it is the other white fluffy piece of bread on the crap sandwich. But instead of focusing on the crap, the whole sandwich itself is the problem, because Biden and his puppeteers want to dismantle the U.S. as we know it and build back better. Understand that? Build back better, where we're nothing more than another country under the World Economic Forum, where we're no longer autonomous. And you don't believe me? Let's go ahead and look at this last quote from Kissinger. NAFTA represents the single most creative step toward a new world order. Of course, NAFTA's been around for a while, and this Declaration of North America is taking it to a whole new level. And understand right now, in the world order, the United States is top. So a new world order means the United States is not on top. Who is? The World Economic Forum. You have to understand, and we need to be ready, because you need to make no mistake, this new world order is coming.